ahead and start our meeting, call our meeting to order. Let the minutes reflect all members are present. And we'll set the agenda. Anybody like to make a motion?
President Priner, staff would like to adjust the agenda.
Okay,
We would like to add a new action item 3, which would be Human Resource Consultant Agreement, and then adjust the other item accordingly.
okay. Anybody else? Okay, we need a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the agenda as requested,
Second?
amended.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the minutes?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the May 9th, 2022 workshop of the Rice Creek Watershed Board of Managers.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Madam Chair, I move approval of the May 11th, 2022 regular meeting of the Rice Creek Board of Managers.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Consent agenda? Patrick, anything?
President Priner, thank you. Staff have 2 applications for your consideration today, both presented without changes.
Okay. Then we'll need a motion.
Madam President, I would move to Cap Rock permit number 22-027 and 22-029. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair, I just point out that the Lauderdale application, in referring to the map, it's in the political boundaries of the Rice Creek watershed, but not the hydrologic boundaries. And I understand that that's being addressed with the boundary work that's being done.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Water quality grant? Molly? Oh, go ahead.
Yep, President Priner, Board of Managers, this morning, taking over in Lauren's role, we have Molly to address the water quality grant program. She'll be doing that from here on out.
Okay, very good.
Usually we have this move under consent agenda, but if you do have questions, obviously she's available.
I did have, well, we'll need a motion, then we'll talk about it in a minute.
Madam Chair, I move approval of water quality grant R22-2 in accordance with the RCWD staff's recommendation based on established program guidelines.
A second?
We have a motion and a second. Just a quick question. I thought over the years that we didn't include permeable pavers in our grant process. Is there some explanation different or something I'm missing? Molly?
President Priner, Board of Managers, Molly, if you're trying to communicate with us, we can't,
Molly, you're on mute. Any?
we-
Is that her? No, Brian Olson is also.
President Priner, Teresa, is Brian on the screen? I'm sorry, my vision
Yeah,
won't
I
allow me
can't
to
see.
see it.
Okay, just all of their mics are off.
There we go.
Sometimes the leader can actually make them
Turn them on.
mute. Yeah,
Well, I do when they enter the meeting,
Oh.
so it isn't.
you're on charge,
noisy,
yeah,
but I'm
okay.
gonna stop doing that. Yeah, she's not.
Okay, well,
Madam President,
Sure.
so you inquired about the permeable pavers, and I guess I can't necessarily speak to our history on that, but, you know, we do recognize that being a type of BMP that does provide a fair amount of value because it, you know, not only provides the ability to do water quality treatment, but also addresses volume and encouraging the water to go down. Do you recall, was there something specific that you remember for a rationale why we?
I don't
would
remember
not?
the rationale, but I remember over the years that we've separated that out from other grants, that we didn't usually accept that.
Okay.
And so I'm wondering,
Madam President, I recall one other time when we did approve it, because I was at that CAC meeting also.
okay,
And I recall that we gave a grant to the city of Mounds View to do it on the street. My personal concern with this one had been the fact that it drains to a wetland. And I figured the wetland is providing much of the benefit we would have gotten by the pavers, but it was not, it didn't seem to be a concern to anybody at the CAC meeting, and I held my peace. There you go.
fair enough.
That's what I know.
Okay. Well, I guess I would like further discussion on that later time, but for now, we can move ahead with that.
So, you're correct some way about it being an issue in the past, although my memory doesn't.
Yeah, and I,
Mine doesn't either, but I remember
All
something
right.
too.
I'm thinking
but I
of one
don't
that was, yeah, so it needs to be investigated.
just looked at one more time, why we, before we, I know we didn't, because we always cut it out, and then we. Do we have?
I was just, President Preiner,
Go
sorry, I was just going to mention the folks on the Zoom call could not hear us.
Oh, okay.
That might have been fixed now.
Ah.
Molly, are you there?
Yes, I am here,
Okay.
President Preiner.
I just brought up the question that over previous years, we did not include permeable pavers in our grant program. And I was just asking what the change was and if there's a difference, or if you know anything about that at this time.
President Preiner, Board of Managers, yes, I have been informed that this hasn't been a common project that has been done in past years. But we wanted to present this project to you today because of the possible water quality benefits that this would have on Turtle Lake in the area. As you can see in your packet, I think it is on page, one moment, please. I'm going to find the correct page for you here. Okay. On page 37, you can see that the volume reduction is 98%, and that's 4,495 cubic feet per year, as well as 98% on both the TSS and TP. So we think that we have decided to present this to you today because it has a good impact on the water quality for Turtle Lake. This project is only up to 50% funding, so it's not the 75% that we would normally give for a larger project like a rain garden. Brian, if there's any other information that you would like to provide to the Board of Managers and President Reiner?
Yeah, just one quick thing. Board of Managers, Brian here from Ramsey Soil Water. The two things just on the permeable pavements in the past, we have in the past done a preference for rain gardens in situations where residents like this wanted to do permeable pavements, just as like a cost effectiveness. However, in the last couple of years, we've seen a couple of permeable projects come through now that we've approved in the past couple of years. And kind of the way that we've been working it moving forward is the problem with doing the permeable pavements in the past is we were looking at paying for whole driveway replacements, which gets really expensive and isn't 100% needed to treat that amount of runoff from the residents. So what we're doing now is, even if they want to do their entire driveway permeable pavements, we'll only pay for the portion, the square footage required to effectively treat the runoff. So that's the case here. So we ran, watershed models to see how much water comes off and what amount of permeable pavement is needed to effectively treat that watershed. And then we'll only cost share for that portion of the project. So that brings our costs down a little bit more and makes it a little bit more feasible that these types of projects can still make sense. In situations where like this too, where there isn't a great spot for a rain garden and just because of the slope of the driveway and stuff. So we've kind of been working it that way moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that answered my question. Anybody else? So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Open mic, is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak today to the board? You're the only one that's not one of us. Or maybe you are.
Yeah. President Reiner.
Yes.
This is Greg Thielman. He is the CEO and president of Houston Engineering.
Nice. Welcome.
Well, good morning. I just wanted to swing by and introduce myself. I'm Greg Thielman. I'm the president of Houston. I've been in this role a little over a year, so many of you have probably met Jeff Ledoux. He was our former president, and Jeff is semi-retired, still helps out on a number of fronts. But just wanted to get down here and introduce myself, and thank you for the work you do and the opportunity that we have to serve you as your district engineers. So my background is water resources. I've been with Houston for about 25 years, so know Nick a little bit through floodplain management circles, so I still try to stay connected on the floodplain side as well. So
Well, thank you. You do an excellent job, your organization does.
appreciate that.
We appreciate it.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming.
Yep. Okay, that's open mic. Items requiring board action. Tom.
Madam President, Board of Managers, for your consideration today, there's a petition for the abandonment of Branch 12 of Anoka County Ditch 72. This has been a kind of a involved process for this development in Lino Lakes. In 2021, you accepted a petition for a partial abandonment and realignment for a portion of Branch 12 and ordered it under a resolution. However, now they wish to abandon the entire branch. And that's in your packet for consideration today.
Tom, could you look at page 48 of our, I would just like to understand the map a little bit. Just a
My
quick-
packet is not an actual
Oh, I'm
packet,
sorry.
Sorry.
It's the map that,
Oh, I think it's in here.
just like to have you walk through that a second and show us, if you can.
Go ahead, I have the map.
Okay. No, I just want you to walk through what is extending. So now they're doing the whole thing instead of before they were only doing partial? Is that what I understand?
Yeah, I might default to Christopher's
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Chris.
expertise on that.
Yeah, Madam President, on that map where you're looking at here on page 48, on the left-hand side of the graphic, you'll notice that there's a rectangle that kind of is an exception to the rest of the project. And on the east side of that rectangle, you can see BR 12 there, that's branch 12. That is the branch that the applicant is intending to abandon. Back when we worked through the previous petition, we recognized that since that landowner was served by the tile, that that tile couldn't be abandoned, otherwise they'd be losing the drainage benefit for that landowner going through. So they came up with a rerouting of the water to come back into Anoka County Ditch 72 via a different method through that development. And now what the applicant is tending to do is just to take that water from that landowner down into their local storm sewer and out a different path. So it wouldn't be part of the public drainage system anymore. They'll still be handling the water, but not part of the public drainage system. And I understand that the landowner has essentially signed off on the petition for this.
Yes, I'm
So,
sorry. They're co-petitioners with.
They're co-petitioners,
With
so
the
they both
developer,
are
yeah.
agreement on it. Okay.
and, right now, all we're asking the board is to accept the petition for review, and then you'll have another chance at this, at the public hearing to review fully once we've completed an engineer's report on it and to consider the approval of the petition action.
Okay.
Madam President,
Yes, go ahead.
Tom, this doesn't impact anybody who's upstream of the development.
they still are going to have, east of this, are still going to have their drainage, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Manager Waller, Madam President.
Madam President, if I could just ask a question.
Sure.
Within that little
Rectangle?
rectangle, thank you. There's a small section of branch 12 that's not been hatched out, and it also goes south, or goes whichever direction it goes
East.
down. Along that property, it looks like that remains in place, part of the branch 12?
Madam President, Manager Bradley, that actually is what the applicant is proposing to realign that drainage from that tile. That vertical line, blue line coming along the east edge of that rectangle is not actually part of the public drainage system. So it's just a planned storm sewer now for this modification to get it down to that pond.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Yes, so Madam
Go
President,
ahead.
this petition would abandon the entirety of branch 12.
Okay.
So there'd be none remaining after
It would abandon the entirety?
of branch
Branch
12.
12.
Branch 12.
And we've already
Yes,
approved the
yes.
partial abandonment, correct?
Of a portion,
That's right,
yes.
yeah. Okay, we'll need a motion for the resolution 2022-15.
Madam President, I would move Resolution 2022-15, the findings in order accepting the petition and directing appointment of engineer in the matter of the petition to abandon Branch 12 in Anoka County Ditch 72, ordering and appointing Houston Engineering to investigate the effect of the proposed action under the standards found in Section 103E.806, file a report of those findings. The engineer is directed to include in its investigation and assessment of the effects from the proposed action to private property, which may require petitioners to acquire flowage or other easements related to the diversion of drainage system waters, and an assessment of the impact of the proposed action on the function and integrity of the remainder of CD 72 system. The order is not an approval of the proposed action, nor does it modify the drainage system or abandon any portion thereof. Subsequent proceedings on the petition will occur consistent with the requirements of MnSTAT, Section 103E.806.
Second?
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Anybody? Be a roll call. Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Wynant?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wakeman?
Yes.
Manager Kreiner, yes. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, calendar adjustment, Nick?
Yes, President Priner, Board of Managers, staff is recommending an adjustment to your 2022 meeting calendar. The MOD Summer Tour is scheduled for August 24th. That coincides with your board meeting. The staff proposed that you meet on Tuesday, August 23rd. That avoids a conflict, allows managers who would like to attend both events. And the staff would recommend that, adjusting your calendar. The Mounds View facilities are available to us on that day. With your approval, we will update the postings and the calendar as reflected in your packet on page 54.
All right.
Madam Chair, I move to amend the 2022 board calendar for the second August meeting to be held on Tuesday, August 23rd in the city of Mountain View Council Chambers.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, then we're gonna move number 3, the human resource issue. That'd be Nick.
Yes, President Priner, Board of Managers, the board has had a number of discussions with staff regarding various human resource matters. We discussed at our last workshop in May an organizational chart a little bit, and some staffing needs within the district for various programs. At that time, we handed out a profile for Ellen Henricks of career enhancement options. She is a human resource consultant, and we believe would be helpful in supporting the district as it moves through a number of items. Number one, maybe being organizational structure, how the district positions are arranged. and look to implement perhaps some hierarchy over time. What are the options that the district could do, and how is that beneficial in moving this organization forward? Staff retention has recently, or is always an issue, but maybe heightened so at the current employment climate. We've had a number of comments made about the policy manual that the district has, its merit table, in guidelines. I've had interest from staff about how they might progress through the district instead of them departing. We'd like to look at that as well. The contract that I've shared with Ms. Hendricks, she is in agreement to. It is a 2-year term, although we do have the opportunity to back out of that as we see fit. There's a not to exceed amount within there of $25,000. The board under its, as it sees its needs, can increase that amount accordingly if things look positive. And I suggest we just kind of step through this, and I'll do my best to keep the board informed of those steps. I think it's a bit of an iterative process in covering these matters.
Madam President, I'll make the motion for discussion, and I move the contract with Human Resource Consultant Agreement Career Enhancements Options Incorporated, authorizing the administrator to sign the agreement between Rice Creek Watershed District and Career Enhancement Options.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Madam President, a couple things. As I read this, page 1 of this, what jumps out at me is I'm happy to hear about the organizational structure being re-examined. That's fine. I think what the second word is the one that catches my attention, productivity. So in my career, productivity means doing more with less personnel, more technology. I think we are at the point where some of our, I'm going to call them sections, because we have different sections as I see it, you know. I see 2 of them here in the audience today, Mr. Koshin and Mr. Schmidt, each individual sections. And we're going to expand, or have expanded their help, and that's important. But I want to make sure that when we have a productivity, we don't end up like some of our neighbors to the north of us, who went from an administrator a few years ago to a dozen employees now, and proposing to spend millions of dollars on facilities on the lakes, and for a 25-mile square watershed, whereas we have 180 square mile and do the same thing. So I'm a little apprehensive, because one of the things I remember at the workshop was that this organization, Career Enhancement Options, was instrumental in helping the Forest Lake, Comfort Lake grow that way. And I'm not interested in expanding so much as technology rather than personnel from that point of view. And then finally, of course, I see Drainage Inspector Schmidt's with us today. And when we began this process a couple of years ago, he was on medical leave at the time. He did not write a description of his job, and I'd certainly like to see them have some input into the description of that job. It's very important. And also, Mr. Koshin's in the audience, and he's working, I hope, diligently, I'm sure, on writing a description for the assistant for him, too, to be included. Both departments are significant. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay. Go ahead, Martin.
Madam Chair, Manager Waller, I was in agreement with you until about halfway through your discussion point here. I say if we're gonna get work done, we're gonna need warm bodies to do it. So I'm looking forward to this evaluation, and would probably fall on the other side of things, where I know that we have a lot of work to do, and we need people to make that happen.
Well, Madam President, I'm not surprised that you wouldn't agree with me on that issue. But our primary mission, one of the poor things about the Watershed District statute is it has about 14 different subdivisions that you can get into. It's just a regular menu of different things you can decide a district can get into. And so you can really grow personnel in order if you wanted to do all 14 subdivisions. But we have concentrated mostly on the stormwater conveyance system and not gotten into large explorations of other areas that are legitimately available to us by the statute. So that's why I would like to stick to what our business is making the water go away down the river and not worry about the other things that, such as, for example, Forest Lake, Comfort Lake created, I read the other day in the paper while I was at the tire shop, a wetland banking credit system in order to improve the water quality on the St. Croix. Well, all right. But I'm not worried about the St. Croix or the Mississippi or Lake Pepin, as we've heard in the past. So that's why I say I like to stick there. Thank you,
Go
ma'am.
ahead, and then we'll talk to Lewis, the manager.
Yeah,
Okay,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, bringing us back to this issue, one of the things that a small organization like us needs to be able to do is to go outside our own environment to find talent, because we can't afford to grow our own talent for finite specialties like this. It's one of our tough balances, and we've got the president of Houston Engineering here, is balance when should we use Houston Engineering, which we rely on daily, versus when we should add staff. And that's something that I know you have been working on, we've been working on all the time. What can we do alone and what can't we do best alone? And that's the proper discussion for today, and I think this is the right action to do, and I'm pleased with what appears to be the quality of this candidate.
Manager
So,
Wakeman?
Madam-
Let's
Go
let's
ahead, Steve.
Well, I agree. I think this is the right way to go about it, and we have control over the whole process, so I look forward to seeing what we find out.
Madam President, I'm supportive of this contract, but I'm putting some parameters on it. And I want to point out that I agree with you, Manager Bradley, that you need to have top talent. That's why we hired Doug Thomas years ago when we were here. And we
I don't
brought,
think he's unavailable to us, but okay.
he's at Houston Engineering, Mr. President, isn't he? I understand he's a consultant down there at Houston Engineering. And the point here is that with him in the first year, we brought some changes here. One of them was Houston Engineering, by the way. I remember being interested in seeing them come here and working on that. And then the other thing that happened was that he brought what I call the core 5 areas in here that we have. One of them is Mr. Koshin, and another one, Mr. Schmidt, was actually recruited by him down there at the time because of his particular expertise. And, we brought Nick here, was one of them. And the last one is Kyle. But, of course, we had the center of the hub with Teresa. She's always been. But those folks haven't left, is what I'm saying. We have some personnel turnover, but it's not been in the core.
Okay, let's go to Nick.
Thank you. President Priner, Board of Managers, my comments here are to reiterate my position and hopefully establish some clarity as to what I'm advocating for here. While I recognize the state statute allows the district a broad swath of what I'd like to do, you've worked diligently and adopted a watershed management plan that directs exactly the work that we'll be undertaking. That is the second clause of the statement that Manager Waller pointed out, so I'd like that recognized. In 2008, when I came on board, since that time we've generally doubled in size, yet we've had no change to our structure. We've adopted the new watershed management plan expressing those things that we're going to undertake. So I think it is time to look at that. Technology, yes, I think can be an asset. We're obviously using it in these times, look to advance that, and certainly whether it's technology or how we engage our consultants when, and whether that should be internal staff or not. I think under the regulatory program, for example, sometimes we have to ebb and flow with the economy, decrease those historic permits and that sort of thing, and make sure we remain fluid and nimble. Job descriptions, those in my mind are a balance. First and foremost, they're written by the district for the district's needs as it's defined in their watershed management plan. Certainly we want happy employees, so we would look for their expertise and also where they would like their professional development to go, and work that balance out with them directly. The job descriptions that were written, including the inspector role that Mr. Schmidt holds, were written for the duties that were being worked in the present time. We'll make adjustment to those as we move forward to be consistent with the watershed management plan and further those efforts. And that was done by staff and myself that are involved in consultation with the people doing the position. Regarding Mr. Thomas, we may engage him. We do have those historic permits. I think in a policy parameter, he may be helpful in bringing that forward. We've had a little bit of a bumpy ride periodically on these human resource matters. I think it's all been positive. Your individual wishes as managers, I look forward to the debate as a board and the direction, and I'll do my best to give you good feedback loop and for you to see what Ms. Henricks is recommending and bring a couple of options to the table when we do that. Thank you.
And that's what I was gonna say too. It'd be good, Ms. Hendricks couldn't be here today to introduce herself, but I'd like to, a couple workshops down the road, have her come in, and maybe you guys will have a plan as to what your steps are gonna be. And then at that point, if there's debate on it, that's the time to do it before you actually dig into it. So, but I'd like to get this going by getting it approved today.
Yes.
Well, Madam President, I'll call for the vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we will move on. Thank you, everybody.
It's up to me here.
Check register.
Madam President, I move to approve the check register dated May 25th, 2022 in the amount of $253,787.73 prepared by Redpath and Company.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Peltier Centerville Lake Study Update. Matt?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Give me 1 second here to get this loaded up.
I can't wait to hear this.
That'd be good.
And there it is. Okay, it's working. Excellent. Okay, Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for having me. Here to give an update on the Peltier Centerville backflow study that was recently completed. I'm going to hit some of the high points of this and then talk about the next steps. I'm probably not going to do the study justice. I mentioned to District Engineer Otterness, if you have any comments along the way, anything to add, please chime in, or maybe I'll look to you at some point if there's anything you'd like to add on it. Okay. So, starting off here, the problem with Centerville Lake, algae blooms. Centerville Lake is the only lake in our watershed right now that is experiencing a statistically significant declining trend in water quality. So all of the other lakes in the watershed are either essentially staying the same, or getting better in many cases. Centerville Lake, not so much. The graph here shows you what's going on. In recent years, we're seeing increases in total phosphorus and chlorophyll A. I'll also note that this graph here, these are averages. These are summer averages. And actually, I think they don't quite do it justice. I'm going to skip over the clarity one here and go right to the picture. The averages, I think, don't do it justice because what we've been seeing the past few years is relatively clear water in the spring and then some pretty significant and severe algae blooms later in the summer. So I think the problem in terms of the severity of the algae blooms is even worse than some of the graphs or the data would indicate. The condition that we're seeing here, this is about as severe as it gets. But in cases like this, I mean, there are blue-green algae postings around the lake. The beach is closed. A good portion of Centerville Lake is Anoka County Park. There's beach there that is unusable when conditions are like this. So focus on what the problems are here, what projects we can do to try and address this. We looked back to the TMDL study for Peltier and Centerville Lake that was completed in 2013. Now that study indicated that up to about 45% of the phosphorus budget for Centerville Lake could be from backflow from Peltier Lake. I'll talk more about what that means in a second. But I'll also note in that study that getting to that number was a relatively rough estimate. And they were just kind of relying on leftovers from a model. So they didn't look at it in great detail. That was a rough estimate. They also noted that internal loading could be an issue in Centerville Lake, although the TMDL study, again, doesn't really get into great detail on how much. Since then, we did an internal loading study in Centerville Lake. That's where we collect sediment cores and look at sediment phosphorus release rates. That was in 2019. That indicated that internal loading is probably playing a much larger role than what was thought during the TMDL study. There was an alum treatment that was done in 1998. I think I forgot to mention this on this slide here. There's where it's showing up in 1998. And water quality conditions following that improved for a number of years. The study that was conducted in 2019 indicated that treatment was likely wearing off. So there's a couple of past studies, but neither of those really got into the details of potential backflow from Peltier Lake. We saw this as being kind of the last piece of the puzzle for Centerville Lake before we might take action to try and address the water quality issues there, and a prerequisite to considering some larger types of action like another alum treatment. Knowing how much or how big the backflow issue is would be a prerequisite to that. I'll mention carp probably again later. So just some notes on the watershed for Peltier and Centerville Lake. The watershed draining to Peltier Lake is huge. The watershed to lake area ratio is 140 to 1. Wow. So, you know, a good portion of our watershed to the north and east drains through Peltier Lake. Centerville Lake, on the other hand, has a relatively, not even relatively, it has a very small watershed draining to it. The watershed to lake area ratio is less than 1 to 1, which is very rare. Typically, lakes with that small of a watershed to lake area ratio, like White Bear Lake, like Turtle Lake, have very good water quality. Not so in Centerville Lake. But also note that the water quality conditions in the two lakes are pretty dramatically different. This is even with some of the declining conditions that we're seeing in Centerville Lake. Peltier Lake has at least double, sometimes more phosphorus in it compared to Centerville Lake. So again, emphasizing the need to know more about the potential issue with the backflow. Is this a big issue or not? So here's a diagram of the system. There's an equalizer pipe that goes between Peltier and Centerville Lake underneath Main Street there. This is just adjacent to the city of Centerville. Under typical conditions or normal flow conditions, water is flowing out from Centerville through that equalizer pipe into Peltier, then over the dam. But it was hypothesized that when water levels are very high in Peltier Lake, perhaps after a large storm or snow melts in the spring, that you could get backflow, bringing that high phosphorus water from Peltier into Centerville Lake. So the Watershed District acquired Bowser watershed-based implementation funding grant to look at this, about $90,000. The first phase, which is now complete, is defining that relationship. Is this a big problem or not? How much water backflows from Peltier to Centerville? How big of a problem is it? And then the second part of it, which Houston is working on right now, and I got the draft that you sent, Chris, looking at potential feasibility options to address it. So the district utilized our outside services policy to garner engineering proposals for this. Houston put together a really great proposal demonstrating experience with the system and underlined there the ability to efficiently utilize the district-wide model. So that is what made their proposal very efficient. I think that was an excellent use of the district-wide model, allowed us to skip over some of the potentially expensive field work that we might otherwise need to do in order to evaluate this issue. So I think it turned out very well. So I'm going to jump right to some of the high points of Houston's results here. And Chris, this is where you can chime in. Maybe I'll look over to you if you want to add anything at all. But basically what Houston found was that when we have very large precipitation events, approximately about 1.9 inches, you can see on the bottom of the graph there, about 1.9 inches of rain or more, there's the potential for backflow from Peltier to Centerville. So that's a pretty large rain event. Obviously it can happen, but not so frequently. But then obviously when you start getting to the really large rain events, 2.5, 3 inches, something like that, or maybe pair that with a large snowmelt runoff, then backflow could be more of an issue. So obviously from year to year then this varies. If we're looking from 2007 to last year, 2021, we can see the number of rainfall events that exceed that threshold. So this is the number of times that Peltier Lake is backflowing into Centerville Lake. It's not that often, anywhere from 0 to maybe 3 times per year. So in some years, like some of the dry years of 2007, 2008, 2013, essentially what the model is showing is there's no backflow from Peltier to Centerville Lake in those years, and therefore no backflow phosphorus loading. In some of the wetter years, like 2016, or again in 2018, we have 2 or 3 of those events where we're getting large rain events. Then we're seeing more of that backflow, more of the phosphorus coming into Centerville Lake from Peltier. Chris, anything else to add there? I suppose that's pretty high level.
Yeah, I mean, one thing just to keep a note is that even in those years where we are showing that there was a backflow volume, and Matt will get into this a little bit, but the numbers might look large, but in overall scale of how much water flows through and into Centerville, it's not as much.
Madam President, how do you want to handle questions?
Go ahead as we go.
So when we do have a wet year and you get 3 events where it backflows and it brings in phosphorus from Peltier, does that stay there? Does it dissipate? I mean, so since it's not a continual, what's the impact of those occasional flows?
Manager Bradley, good question. I suppose it would be possible for some of that phosphorus to backflow into Centerville Lake, and then as water levels recede in Peltier Lake, some of it to move back out again. I think the issue is if that phosphorus, when it comes in, is fueling an algae bloom, and then that algae dies and falls to the bottom of the lake, enriches the lake sediments, that can become more of a long-term issue. So there's short-term issue is fueling an intense algae bloom. Longer-term issues are the impacts to the lake sediments and things like that. I'll touch more upon that later because there's some potential impacts with past St. Paul Regional Water Services going on there.
So, Madam President,
Go ahead.
are Centerville and Peltier 2 different types of lakes? For example, is Centerville more of a mucky bottom than what Peltier? I mean, Peltier more of a mucky bottom than Centerville, more of a natural lake.
Yeah, President Priner, Manager Waller, Peltier definitely is modified hydrologically with the dam outlet, and was once 4 to 5 feet lower. Both lakes are shallow lakes and essentially function as shallow lakes. They have large littoral areas with lots of plants. In terms of the sediments, I would say Peltier definitely has more unconsolidated and mucky sediments, especially in the northern part of the lake. So similar in that the same region, both shallow lakes, but there are some differences, yes.
And then, there used to be another outlet for Centerville, I think it was another ditch over there. Is that functional any longer, or does that make a difference in high water years where suddenly it's high enough for it to flow out and causing more water to flow into Centerville?
Yeah.
You know?
Manager Wall, you're referring to Anoka County Ditch 25.
Thank you.
And,
I couldn't
and
remember.
actually, it used to be that Anoka County Ditch 25 would flow into
Into it, yeah, that's
Centerville.
the other way. All right.
And now, that channel that went in there has essentially been abandoned. So it's going to be very infrequent that Centerville would potentially backflow through that channel and then into Rationale Lake.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
just to bring it up on the map there, I think you can see it at the
Yeah.
southern end of Centerville Lake, the abandoned channel where Centerville perhaps used to flow out to the south, but now for all intents and purposes that is abandoned. We don't see water flowing through it. Okay. So moving on to the summary here, on average, obviously it varies from year to year, but on average, the slice of the pie that is backflow loading from Peltier to Centerville Lake, that's a very small impact on Centerville Lake. Something like 2% of the annual phosphorus budget for Centerville Lake, so a small problem. I think this study also emphasized or was able to refine the overall so I talked about the 2% being backflow loading, but it was able to refine the other pieces of the pie, that is direct drainage, internal loading. So we've refined this several times now, from the TMDL study to the internal loading study to this. I think this is the most accurate picture we have of phosphorus loading in Centerville Lake, and I think it allows us to take the next step now to act. So I mentioned that backflow phosphorus loading, small problem, but it does vary from year to year. And in some years, again, like 2007, 2008, that total backflow load, so this is when we're taking, this table here is when we're taking the backflow volume, and then we're looking at phosphorus concentrations in Peltier Lake, phosphorus concentrations in Centerville Lake, and assessing, well, what is the total impact to Centerville Lake in terms of the phosphorus load that's being delivered to it. Again, in those dry years, 2007, 2008, it's minuscule. It's 1 to 2 pounds or less. In some of the wetter years, like say 2016, it can be a bit higher, you know. And certainly the district works on many projects where we're trying to cut out 50 to 75 pounds of phosphorus. That's not an insignificant amount. Now, in a wet year like 2016, all of the other pieces of phosphorus loading go up also, so it's a little bit disingenuous to say that 70 pounds here is still a huge impact, but at least to say that the district most definitely works on projects that try to address something like 70 pounds of phosphorus going into it. So I think the take-home message here with this is that impact from backflow loading from Peltier to Centerville is low, but if we are able to identify a modest mitigation project, something that doesn't cost a whole lot that could mitigate this, might be warranted. I'm seeing in the notes, Christy sent over in the draft, that of course we'll have to consider maintenance issues too, with changing the hydraulics of the two lakes, working with St. Paul Regional Water Services, who owns that conveyance, the pipe between the two lakes. So those are all things that we're going to be thinking about as we're going forward. One other note that I'll make here, and I regret I don't have a slide on it, but we asked Houston to look into past backflow loading. So everything that we've looked at now is essentially after St. Paul Water Services ceased pumping water out of Centerville Lake. So I think for the board members that aren't familiar, St. Paul Regional Water Services used to draw water from Centerville Lake. I think at one time it was one of their primary sources for drinking water for the city of St. Paul. Much of the quote-unquote plumbing that was done, ditches, conveyance systems, things like that, in the upper part of the watershed was to enhance all of the water delivery from the upper watershed through Peltier Lake into Centerville Lake to ensure adequate water supply. So we asked Houston Engineering to look at, and this would be a very rough estimate since we're looking so far back in time, but say in a drought year, a severe drought year like 1988, when St. Paul Water Services pumped a significant amount of water out of Centerville Lake, lowering the water level and really driving the backflow from Peltier to Centerville Lake, what was the impact in those years? Again, I think Houston, you went through Chrissy went through 2 or 3 different ways to estimate that, just because we're looking at older data and having to come up with rough estimates. But even the most conservative estimate in those years was several thousand pounds of phosphorus coming from Peltier to Centerville Lake. So that suggests that when that pumping system was in place and being used to a high degree, backflow loading was perhaps the primary driver of phosphorus loading in Centerville Lake in those years. That could explain some of the reason why we're seeing an internal phosphorus loading issue now in Centerville Lake. It's a bit atypical to see a lake with such a small watershed having such high internal phosphorus loading issues. That past backflow loading could be what's driving that.
Matt, but you had an alum treatment after that. Wouldn't that have taken care of that?
Manager Bradley, thanks for bringing that up. Now I'm, I think, going to answer that question in the next couple of slides.
Okay.
But let me know if I don't answer it.
All right.
Or doesn't make sense. Okay, so next steps here, and then I'll talk about the past alum project a little bit. Houston is currently looking at backflow mitigation options, have a draft from them that was just delivered. Again, here we're trying to match the scale of this effort to the problem. It's a small problem, so if we can identify a relatively low-cost project that could address this, then it's something that we could consider. I think if we are going to move forward with something, we'll be back in front of the board to talk about that. We are going to be evaluating the carp population in Centerville Lake. That's something that's happening this summer. I think that's another prerequisite to considering, or before considering another large project like an alum project. So that's something that we're going to look at. I think what we're seeing now is that evidence is building across the board that for a potential future alum treatment, one, internal phosphorus loading is high and makes up a pretty large portion of the total annual phosphorus budget for Centerville Lake, and it really does need to be addressed if we're going to improve water quality in Centerville Lake. And then 2, I think alum is the right tool. I think as we go along and evaluate the other tools to look at internal phosphorus loading, there are other products or chemicals like Phoslock that could be used to address internal loading, and we can evaluate all of those. But the evidence is building that internal loading needs to be addressed, and alum or some other internal loading tool like it is the right tool. Now this is a bit scary. Like with everything else, costs have gone up. Aluminum sulfate, which is used in drinking water treatment plants across the United States, cost of that has gone up dramatically. I'm told something like 40% in the past few years. Our previous rough estimate for the cost of an alum treatment in Centerville Lake was in the $800,000 range. Now we're looking at least $1 million. So not a small project to say the least. But on the bright side, there are grants available to cover this now. When we did the Bald Eagle Lake alum treatment, many of the grant programs at the time were not eligible to fund alum treatments in lakes. They are now. And so that's something that we'll be looking at. We're looking into it now, investigating it now. Manager Bradley, to your question about the past alum treatment, this was done in 1998. You can see some of the photos there on the right. I think the photos indicate that even for 1998, there was some antiquated equipment and antiquated technologies that were being used there. From all of our records, it certainly appears like the alum treatment that was done in 1998 was small, underdosed. Roughly 20%, that project was roughly 20% of what would be considered a modern alum treatment or a modern alum dose. Going back through the records and looking at board meeting minutes and things like that, it seemed to be balancing, I suppose as it always does, what the board wanted to do or what was recommended as the best option and the cost. Yet, even with that, I think, relatively small alum treatment, there's some evidence that improved water quality conditions for 10 to 15 years. So it worked pretty well in the past. I'll also note, and I think we've talked about this in the past, but there have been other efforts in recent years to address other sources of phosphorus loading to Centerville Lake. We've done several good projects, I think, with the city of Centerville. One of them being a large shoreline stabilization. That was a really incredible erosion issue on the eastern shoreline of Centerville Lake. The lake has a pretty good fetch, lots of wind blowing waves into the eastern shoreline, whole lot of erosion happening there. I think that project did some good, but that's one of many projects that have been done to address other phosphorus loading sources to Centerville Lake. So I'll leave it there. If there are questions, discussion, or I should ask once again, Chris, if there's anything you'd like to add with the study?
No, I think, Matt, you did a great job with this. I really don't have a whole lot to add here.
Madam
Thanks.
President,
Go ahead.
Matt, would you talk about what you plan to do about the carp before we get into the alum?
Yep, President Priner, Manager Waller. Carp, I think the board knows by now that carp at high enough densities can cause water quality problems. There's also emerging research over the past 10 years or so to show that they can have a very specific effect on alum treatments, and that they decrease the lifespan of an alum treatment. So aluminum sulfate as a tool in lakes has been around for many years. In the past, it I guess I'd say got sort of a bad rap because results were uneven. In some lakes, you might have seen 20 years worth of good water quality improvement after it, and other lakes, maybe 1 or 2. And so there's been research in the past few years looking at what's driving that. And one of the factors that would decrease the lifespan of an alum treatment would be a high carp population. So the survey is going to be done this year. I think if the survey indicates that there is a large carp population, then that would be another prerequisite to considering an alum treatment in the future if we're going to get that long lifespan out of the project.
So, Madam President, so that I understand, you're saying that you're going to do a study this summer on the carp. If the carp are a problem, we need to remove the carp before we put the alum in. Is that what I understand you to say, sir?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Marcia.
I'll follow up on the carp, and then I have another question. So the carp that are finding their way up from Long Lake are eventually also ending up in Centerville Lake? There's a lot of barriers for those fish to cross, isn't there?
Yeah, President Priner, Manager Wynant, likely not. Past tracking studies of carp in the Long Lake Lino Chain of Lake system shows that they do not regularly move from the Long Lake Lino Chain of Lake system up into the Peltier and Centerville system because of the Peltier Dam.
Yeah.
Under very, very high water quality conditions, water level conditions, that's not even this year, I'm talking even higher.
Mm-hmm.
The dam is passable by carp under those conditions, but past tracking data indicate that periodic movement is probably not a large piece of the population in Peltier and Centerville Lake.
So these carp are within Peltier, Centerville, pretty much
Correct.
isolated within there. Okay. Then my other questions is, are Anoka County and the city of Centerville, how engaged are they in this effort and study?
Yeah, President Priner, Manager Wynant, City of Centerville is aware of this work. They're supportive of it. The Lake Association, the Centerville Lake Association has already been pushing for an alum treatment. Of course, they've heard about the Baldy to Lake alum treatment, and in their pushing, they've engaged the city, engaged us, and so discussions have already started there. I would say that the city is definitely supportive of improving water quality conditions on the lake. Like every other agency, the price tag is a bit scary, but I would say that they're willing to partner with us.
And Anoka County, because it's
Manager Wynant, less clear there.
Okay.
I think we've had some discussions with them. Anoka County Parks certainly would be supportive of improved water quality conditions to the extent that they would partner on a large project, unclear at this point.
Okay, and then, Madam Chair, I just would note that I believe the shoreland restoration that was done on the east side of the lake might have had something to do with a ski club also, a water ski
There's
club?
a ski jump there, yeah.
Yes, and I was on the Citizens Advisory Committee when we looked at and improved that. So it's good to see how these projects end up being built upon one another. You gotta fix this before you can fix another thing. And yes, it takes time and citizen engagement to make it happen.
Madam President. Another issue that I would like us to think how we can help is wakeboards.
Yeah.
Every time I live on Bald Eagle, as you know, and every time I see one of those wakeboards out there, I think, oh, Lord, what are they doing to my bottom? And at this point, the legislature's not going to help us. We aren't going to have authority to stop it, but maybe we can start thinking about educating the owners associations, the lake owners associations, and engage them in educating the wakeboard owners. They're not going to go away, but maybe we can help direct them some way usefully. It's kind of like EIS. We can't stop it, but maybe you can help. So not the plate's not already full, but that's one I'd also like us to start working with our neighbors. Thank you.
Madam
Is that a big problem? I mean, have you got quite a few?
Oh, yeah, and they particularly like it when they get side by side, so they can make a really big ramp. Yeah.
Send directions to another lake, see?
Yeah, there you go.
Madam President, would you refresh the board, or myself particularly, on some of our past activities we've done in the last 30-some years on the carp business above the Peltier Dam? We've done some up towards Columbus and Forest Lake and such, just to give a little background.
Sure, yeah, President Reiner, Manager Waller, our efforts in the Peltier and Centerville chain to date have been mainly supporting U of M research looking into movement of carp through the system, so we have some information there. To date, we haven't taken direct action to manage carp in the Peltier-Centerville area. We have further upstream, as we go up the upper portion of Rice Creek into Howard Lake, the district worked with the DNR to do a rotenone project that's eliminating all fish in Howard Lake somewhere around 2006, I believe. That resulted in dramatically improved water quality conditions. The lake went from being listed as impaired for nutrients to now being removed from the list. A little bit further upstream of that, the district has partnered with the Clear Lake Association to do some carp removal there. I would say that was a modest effort, but had some good returns.
Thank you.
Nick?
President Preiner, Board of Managers, quickly, thanks Matt for all this information. You have the two major tenets of the district, water quality and flooding. And what I take away from this on the broad level is it's complicated. We have multiple inputs for all of this. The monitoring, the modeling that the district does is all the base for our understanding of the real problem that we're trying to address before we take action. It helps us to manage expectations. You get clear water, you have greater vegetation. Is that what, we want to preface that to the public so they know where things are headed. These do provide us the base of information, our options. It supports us in applying for grants, as you know. We look for traditional as well as innovative ideas to address these types of problems. And there can be at any time multiple solutions, and it's staff's work to present them to you as cost benefit and what might be best in the given point in time, who the willing landowner is, so on and so forth. I'll note mention of Centerville and where they were at. Matt, maybe you could comment. I believe Centerville did a number of projects, or is certainly receptive to projects on the external loading aspect of that. They have water reuse and so on. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for Matt? Thank you, Matt.
If I might add one last thing,
Go ahead.
because Nick triggered it in my mind there. I mentioned that grant treatment, grant dollars are available for alum treatments, perhaps even more so than quote-unquote more traditional types of grants for traditional types of projects. Alum treatments are, there would be a great deal of scrutiny on grant applications for alum treatments, even though they are eligible. So to Nick's point, building out this information on the front end, absolutely essential to be successful in that type of grant.
So we can justify a grant.
And Matt, those would be clean water funds that are funneled through the Board of Soil and Water Resources for alum treatment?
I'm sorry, Manager Weiner, can you repeat?
I said those grant dollars are clean water funds that are funneled through the soil, or the Bowser Board for alum treatment, or is it DNR?
Bowser,
Bowser,
yes.
yeah.
Clean Water Fund. Thanks.
Madam President, let's not forget that, as long as you're talking about financing, that, wasn't that a low-interest loan that we had through the Bowser for Bald Eagle? And alum
PCA.
treatment? PCA, was it? Okay. That's an avenue that's available. I think it was 0% interest or something, or really, really small, whatever it was. And then that created the extra taxing district there. But just to point that out, those are other avenues that are available in addition to grants.
Anything else from Matt? All right, thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Staff reports, anybody have any comments on any of the staff reports today?
Well, Madam Chair, as Matt is returning to his chair, if you look at his report, he has an exclamation point after carp removal, so. And I understand you're nearing the end of that now. Yeah, yeah. Come back.
Yep, President Preiner, Manager Wynan, that was a big part of the time in the early spring here, March and April especially. It is starting to wind down. I can give a brief update now. Over 60%, maybe approaching 70% of the migrating carp population out of Long Lake was removed this past spring. I think somewhere around 14,000 carp. So better than last year. Things went very well. I think I'll be back with a more detailed update at a later board meeting.
Very good.
Excellent.
Anything else on staff reports? If not, we'll go to the June calendar, page 97.
President Preiner, I handed out before the managers this morning is an update to your June calendar. A potential item for attendance of the managers to Anoka County Ditch 5362 main trunk repair project. It's an informational meeting that we'll have with the adjacent landowners along the corridor in Circle Pines. The board has ordered this project. Certainly managers are welcome to attend, and it's been noticed accordingly.
Everybody has that to add to their calendar. Okay, administrator update?
Yes, stemming from the last comment, managers, if you should receive a comment or concern from a landowner, happy to have you engage with me and our staff as you have in the past. That's what we're here for, and we're happy to go on a conference call or what have you and hash the matter out or understand it. We certainly want to be responsive. We believe we are as staff to all inquiries that come our way, but if we're not involved, we can't do that. Other updates, I did complete a presentation along with Manager Preiner and Manager Wagaman for the Anoka County Intergovernmental Committee. I'll leave them to note further if they'd like there on the update of the district. Our new hire, Allie Chalberg, which will be focusing on Lauren's work, is slated to start on June 6th, so we're happy about that. All the positions have been posted, and from there I'll go on and say, we'll ask Beth is here, has joined us, Beth Cranio, to give us a little legislative update of what we're seeing, and then she is in her last days with the district. Thank you.
Welcome, Beth.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, President Preiner, Board. Thank you for letting me come and give a quick legislative update. They went home. They did not get their work done. They
Sometimes that's
did.
better.
They did have an
Yeah, no
agreement.
kidding.
Pardon?
Very positive, thank you.
They did come to an agreement on the omnibus bill at 11:59, but were unable to get both chambers to vote to pass that. At 11:59, they just didn't have time to get their vote taken. So nothing is going to the governor on the omnibus. They also came to a conclusion on the tax bill, but did not get anything passed there. And so it's likely the governor may call a special session, not because he's necessarily so incredibly concerned about the omnibus bill for natural resources, but because they didn't pass the tax bill. If they call them back, it's very likely that when they're doing the tax bill, they'll go ahead and finish up the natural resources omnibus bill, we hope.
Beth, what happened to the issue that we've been following out of there?
Thank you for that segue. Perfect. The drainage piece was removed.
All right.
Good.
I was told actually that there was that the compromise they came to at 11:59, it was a pretty light omnibus bill. There was really nothing that stayed in it. A lot was removed. And I have been informed that it is incredibly likely that they will be studying this issue in the public drainage work group next year.
Good.
So
That's what we want.
it's probably not the last time that you'll see it, but it's not going to be in the omnibus bill. So any questions? I can tell you what I know. That's pretty much what I know. But wonderful. All right. Thank you all very much.
One other issue, Madam President.
Yes.
So you got the Anoka's review county report done. How are you coming on Ramsey County?
It's going to be done by 4:30 midnight on Tuesday, May 31st.
You should run for office.
It will get done. It will get done. So,
Beth, I do want to thank you for the report for Anoka County. It was excellent, and they really
Yes.
appreciated it.
thank
Very
you.
much
And it
so.
was-
Thank you.
It was very informational, just what we needed. So.
Good.
Thank
We
you.
took a little bit of, we kind of married some things we'd done in the
Yep.
past with some new ideas, and we're going to try the same thing for Ramsey.
They're
It'll be
very
brilliant.
interested.
Madam
Yeah.
President,
Wait, yep.
Beth, thank you for your service, since you mentioned that you're
Yep.
leaving us at the end of the month at midnight.
Midnight, yeah.
Apparently, we
We're
don't
going
have
to
a,
call you then.
apparently we don't have a coat we can put over the clock so you can stay here. They used to do that in the legislature years ago, you know.
And they might have.
They don't
might
get
have
along
passed
well
our
enough to-
omnibus bill if we'd had
Right,
that.
right. They don't get along well enough to put a quote over the clock. Anyways, but thank you very much for your service here with us, and congratulations and good luck with your new opportunities.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I would
Ditto
agree.
for all
Thank you
of
very much.
Yeah,
Thank
from all of
you.
us.
Best wishes in your new
Yeah.
role.
Thank you.
You'll be missed.
Come on, we got to applaud all that hard work.
Madam
Thank
Chair,
you.
Beth and I started at the same time. I was appointed to the Clean Water Council about the same month that she joined Rice Creek Watershed District. So watching her maneuver through the Citizens Advisory Council and work with the legislature and work with the many partners. And hopefully, is it Molly that's?
Molly Nelson, she's going to be doing the water quality grant and the mini grants in about half time with communications and outreach. So it's a perfect segue to support the CAC and
Yep.
the water stewards, and then the person that goes into this role.
So fortunately, Molly has had some time watching Beth maneuver with the Citizens Advisory Committee. So I will be attending via Zoom on the first meeting without Beth. So I'm looking forward to that.
She's
And
doing a great job. The packets go out today,
Yeah.
so.
Great.
She was, talk about homegrown skill set. She was one of our interns,
mhm,
so, and was able to come back, so.
right.
wow.
So thank you.
All right. Anything else from the administrator?
Nope.
Okay, manager's update. Manager Waller.
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioner Karwoski, I had a couple of questions. One of them happened to do with County Road 12 and the improvement. And of course, I was happy to report that Catherine said we already have the permits and they're working closer with Washington County. Hopefully, we won't have the huge amount of rain that came when we did this downtown in Matamidi, and so they're moving forward in that. The second issue that he was concerned about, of course, was the Halls Marsh issue, and I would say that over the winter time, we've put the new outlet structure in there, and I've met with Councilman McCarthy a couple of times during the winter, and and their issue, one of the issues they seem to be interested in is, and I realize that there's been some comments written by one of our attorneys, was the issue of easements. And while the attorney's comment says that an easement exists with one of the private parties and that the other private parties have never defended themselves on their issue, that really kind of gives the government, the Watershed District, the local unit of government, well, you snooze so you lose kind of attitude. However, the city council says that in the case the water dumps onto the city property, and that there's a different rule with situation with city being government versus rather than private property owners, and that kind of protection of snoozing while you lose doesn't really apply. But I'm certain that was a work forward. Kyle has been working on this diligently, and we'll see what we can do about moving forward and resolving that no man's land question between the outlet of the pipe and the outlet into the lake, which is a question Manager Wine had asked and didn't receive an answer, as I recall, a direct one. So, but that's all I have. Let me see, anything else I want to talk about? No, I don't think so. That's it.
Thank you. Manager Wynant?
Oh, I would only note that the staff reports are amazing. So it's good to see, even though we're not getting, reports on everything that happens every time, it's very nice to follow the progress of the work that the staff is doing. I'm also attending the Citizens Advisory Committee next Wednesday via Zoom, and the Clean Water Council continues to do its work looking at one proposal after another, and also interested in what the legislature came up with, because there's a big chunk of change that could have been added or maybe added yet to that funding source. But as I look at the many projects that Rice Creek alone does, it's with that Clean Water Council money and being able to make that continue once it expires, will be an effort once again. So I appreciate serving on that committee.
Thank you. Manager Wegman, you had to leave too, if you want to go ahead. Oh,
No, I'm good for,
You're good?
I think we'll be done by the
okay.
time I have to.
All right, then go ahead.
I don't
Any
have
update?
nothing. That'll help.
I likewise have nothing.
That'll help.
That'll help.
Okay, Mike?
Nothing, no.
Nothing new? And all I have is the county meeting that we had. Again, a great presentation. Nick did a great job, and all the commissioners were very happy with what our accomplishments are. So I was glad to hear that from them.
Did you do it at a county board meeting?
They have a separate group, intergovernmental group,
Okay.
and so we're invited to that table. It was us and Coon Creek to give presentations.
It was
Oh,
very well
interesting.
received.
So you were
Yeah.
you went to Anoka County?
We went to
at a board
Anoka
meeting.
County, yep, yep.
Yeah, they seemed very interested and all paid attention, and were not in a hurry to get out of there, and
Nobody's looking at their watches.
nope.
So we must have done a good job.
Yeah.
Well, I bet it's very interesting too to hear what Coon Creek is doing.
That was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was
to
very
have.
interesting.
Because the way I understand it, Mike, Ramsey County has 4 watershed districts within it. So,
Couldn't have told you that, but it doesn't surprise me, no.
yeah, yeah. So in talking to commissioners, it's like, okay, what watershed?
Where are you?
How does this work? So,
Okay, with
something
that-
you might be interested in.
Nothing else from anybody? I'll need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
No, we made it just, Heck, I had 8 minutes to spare.
Unless you want to answer these.